Hey guys, welcome back to the workroom. Today we're gonna do a quick tutorial on point cutting. I use it day in and day out in the salon. I barely ever blunt cut. I will use it if I have to, but most of the time I'm doing varying degrees of point cutting. I'll explain to you in depth what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Just follow along with the video. All right guys, so I'm gonna section this out. What is really important to know here is what point cutting isn't. When people see me point cut, they have a tendency to overdo it, or they think what my whole goal is to thin the hair. My goal is not at all to thin the hair. What I'm trying to do is just loosen the shape, just giving it that life and that movement that I want to get out of it. And really importantly, I find hard lines in shape to be kind of gross, if we're being honest. So what I see a lot of times is when stuff is really blunt cut, it comes down into a spot and then it's got a ledge or a heaviness. And when you're cutting really precisely, that isn't always the prettiest thing in the world. So what I did is I naturally started to point cut into it, and just controlling that point cut is basically the key to the battle. So there's 3 different techniques that I use when I point cut. Most of the time, I'm kind of living in an in-between world, but this would be tip pointing. So I tip point. I'm glad I'm wearing a white shirt today so you can see it, or a sort of white shirt. I think it's gray. But the idea is to just point off the line. I still want a line, even though it's not perfect. I still want a heavy line. I just want to break into it with just the tips of my blade, and I'm in it at a degree where I don't get secondary weight lines. This is the real key to where I see people completely leave the reservation. They come in and this is going to be soft. So I got a tip point, right? I'm inside my line, so I'm softening my line, but I'm still leaving a hard shape in there. Okay, so that's gonna give me shape to my haircut, but also I'm gonna get a little softness to the edges. That's all we want. We're not trying to do anything more. The biggest problem I see with people is they come in at too steep of an angle. Well, what did you do? You created both a heavy line on the exterior and then a heavy secondary line on the interior. You might as well hit that with texturizing shears. To me, that's my biggest fear. What I don't want is to see a weight line somewhere and then a 1/4 inch above it, a secondary weight line. That just defeats the whole purpose of taking the time to go in and point cut. That's the biggest mistake I see day in and day out. If you can just turn those shears upright, go a little bit more in line with the hair, you can go in and soften that line up. And I'm also not trying to hit the same spot. It's not a mechanical, let me just run my scissor across the line. I'm really trying to get different spots, but I am trying to cut the line in the shape that I want at the end of the day. So I'm both hitting an interior weight out and putting a line in on the exterior. And that's tip point cutting. All right, now I'm gonna show you what I just call point cutting. You can also, we also in here refer to it as mid pointing. But now we're just gonna go in and we're just gonna do a normal line. And all I'm trying to do is get those variated strikes in the hair. And when I'm doing this, it's not about how many you put. What I'm trying to do is break up the hair. So if it's thicker in one area and finer in another, I'm gonna take a look at, maybe I'm gonna hit that a little bit more in the thicker area, depending on what I'm going for. Now, that changes entirely when you're working with shape. So if I'm doing a haircut and I want it thicker in a spot where it's thinner, I may not hit it. If I want it thicker in a spot that's thicker in my hand, I may not hit it. So I'm gonna be making those real world decisions as I'm working the actual haircut. So for me, a big part of that is knowing exactly where every single strand in my finger is falling on the head and what shape that's given me. So if I don't know that, which is a huge cheat to our industry, not a cheat, but like it's like an unlocking of hairdressing, is once you know where each piece of hair in your hand falls on the head after you make the cut, you're starting to like do real world hair cutting. Then you can kind of unlock hairdressing and get everything you ever wanted out of it. All right, so off topic there, but that loose, let me do it again, that loose mid point cutting is just gonna give me that separation that I want, that when I drop it down, I don't get any weight lines and I get like a nice flowy shape. I still put solid shape in, but I cut into it to loosen it and let it do its thing. All I'm ever trying to do is let the hair dance. I don't want to go in and like melt the hair down in an area by point cut or over point cutting it. At that point, you're just thinning. The other thing to know here is super deep point cutting. And that's what I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna get kind of as deep as I can in that. And I cut, I don't know if you guys can see this on the video, but my cuts happen as I'm coming away. And that takes a little bit of the tension off of the blade and that allows me to get deeper into the hair. Anything kind of deeper than the blade itself can allow, I'll just turn that into slicing. So once I'm too deep for this technique, it just starts to become a slicing technique, even in wet hair. That deep point cutting is going to allow me to go a little deeper, collapse more of that weight out, and then I can, if you're careful, and you have to be very careful on this, you're going to get a little bit more broken and it's going to melt a little bit more into the shape. What we don't want to do there is overdo it and then collapse the shape. I'm always fearful of that. That's not what I'm ever trying to do with hairdressing. All right, I hope that's helpful information for you. Really just be careful not to overdo it. You're almost always better when you're learning texturizing and control of like deep point cutting and slicing and all of these point cutting techniques and all of the things that we'll show you from here on out. What's really important to know is it's easier to add once you get control than it is to get in there and just start melting hair and then working backwards. Most people haven't had these types of cuts before, so I find that it's a little easier to introduce them slowly into it, and for you to get control of it slowly is far better than you going in and overdoing it. When I learned to do point cutting and slicing and all of these techniques, we kind of overdid it and just melted everybody's hair, but the whole industry was learning it at that time. So we were kind of learning to control it, which can take years. You see me do it and it looks really simple, but getting to that point is just takes a little effort. It can all be done. This can all be learned, and with time it gets easier to see how much weight you want out of a shape once you start doing this. But the more you can do it when it's wet, the less work it's gonna be when it's dry, and instead of like taking weight out of areas that I need to manipulate because there are weight lines in it, I can now take that time, earn that time back, and then I can spend it in the face, on the bangs, in the forward graduation, all of those focal points where we do the best for them with our time. So having all that time to detail that out is just gonna make you more money in the long run, and really at the end of the day make them look better, so they'll like you and they'll like your hairdressing more. And I think that's the most important thing you can do for yourself in this industry. All right guys, thanks for watching that video. Keep an open mind. That just takes a little bit of experience to control. It will come, it will be hard at first, especially like learning how to control the depth of your cut. That's super important. And then understanding that like I'm rarely using one technique on the entire head. That's not something I do. I think that's more of like a hair school idea where you take one technique and that's a haircut. Like I don't believe in that. That's not something I do. And the same with my cut techniques. I'm not using one cut technique all over the head. as if it's gonna like magically do a beautiful haircut for me. I'm using my eye. That's the most important thing that you can develop. So developing your eye with the cutting and putting that technique in and learning how to like manipulate weight and what textures those different cuts work best on is all like an experience thing. You'll learn it with time. Just keep up the hard work, and I promise you'll get there. If you like this content and this like did anything for you, please follow along. It's really the only things we need here at the Workroom. We appreciate it, and keep grinding.